Peyton Vance's Laubautin heel snapped right as the gate door slammed shut in her face. She stared at the blinking red sign above gate C-27, flight closed, and let out a breath that sounded more like a war cry. No, 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 she muttered, pressing her phone to her ear. Amy, I told you to hold the plane. Her assistant's voice cracked through the line. They wouldn't wait, Peyton. They said it was FAA regulation or something. I don't care if it was the president's regulation. Am the keynote speaker at the Zurich summit tomorrow morning. Do they not understand who I am? Amy exhaled shakily. I can get you on the next flight, but it's tomorrow afternoon. You'd miss it. Peyton ended the call without another word and stared at the terminal like it had personally betrayed her. She was 32, CEO of her own international branding agency, had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal in L.A., and now she was stranded in an airport like a normal person. Fantastic. She grabbed her carry-on, turned on her heel, and tripped straight over a tiny pink unicorn suitcase. Whoa, came a man's voice as strong hands caught her arms. She blinked up, meeting a pair of dark brown eyes and a face that didn't belong in an airport. Or maybe it did, but only in a film where the rugged single dad saves the day. I'm so sorry, Peyton breathed, brushing herself off. Wasn't watching. It's okay, he said with a tired smile. That suitcase has taken down tougher people than you. A little girl popped up beside him, maybe 5 or 6, with pigtails and a suspicious amount of glitter on her cheeks. You almost fell on my snacks, she said seriously. Peyton crouched down. I would have protected them with my life. The man extended a hand. Elias Nolan, and this is Lily, we're on our way to Chicago. Peyton Vance, she said, shaking his hand. His grip was warm, calloused, not the manicured softness of the boardroom types she usually dealt with. Or at least, I was on my way to Zurich. But apparently, I'm now on my way to nowhere. Missed your flight. By 30 seconds. He gave her a sympathetic look. Rough day. More like a rough year, but thank you. Lily tugged her dad's sleeve. Daddy, can we get pretzels now? In a second, bug. Peyton glanced at the departure board. Her next option wasn't until tomorrow. She ran a hand through her sleek ponytail and sighed. You okay? Elias asked. She glanced at him. He was wearing a worn hoodie, jeans, and sneakers that had definitely seen better days. Something in his eyes looked tired, worn, and yet kind, honest. Not even close, she said with a half laugh, but thank you for asking. There was a beat of silence. Then he nodded toward the coffee shop. Look, I've got a long layover and a kid who's about to go feral if she doesn't get a soft pretzel. You look like you need 10 minutes to breathe. Want to join us? Peyton blinked. You want me to get pretzels with you and your daughter? Only if you want to. She hesitated. She had a dozen emails to answer, a summit to cancel, and a PR team probably panicking over her no-show. But something in Elias's calm, grounded presence made her pause. I could use a pretzel, she said finally. Lily grinned, with cheese dip. With extra cheese dip. They found a table near the window. Peyton watched as Elias pulled a juice box from his backpack, handed Lily a napkin, and made sure she was settled before speaking. She's adorable, Peyton said, sipping her coffee. How old? 6, she just started first grade. And you're traveling alone with her? He nodded. Her mom left when she was 2, it's just been us since. Peyton's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be, Lily's my whole world. I wouldn't have it any other way. Peyton glanced at Lily, who was humming to herself and dipping pretzel bites into cheese like it was her life's mission. Must be hard, though, doing it all on your own. He shrugged. You do what you have to. I run a small carpentry business back home. not exactly raking it in, but it keeps food on the table. Where's home? Just outside of Nashville, we were visiting my sister in L.A. She just had a baby. Lily's obsessed. Peyton smiled. I bet. Elias looked at her curiously. So Zurich, huh? That sounds fancy. It's work. I run a branding firm. We scale luxury companies, international launches, big campaigns. He let out a low whistle. Sounds intense. It is, but I built it from nothing, so don't really get to complain. I think you've earned a pretzel break. She laughed. Yeah, maybe I have. An hour passed without her noticing. They talked about everything: Lily's upcoming ballet recital, Elias's custom woodwork projects, Peyton's chaotic board meetings, and how neither of them really liked airports. At one point, Lily crawled into her dad's lap and fell asleep, her head on his shoulder. You're good with her, Peyton said softly. He looked down at his daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She saved my life. Peyton's throat tightened again. Sorry, he said, didn't mean to get heavy. No, it's okay, she paused. It's actually nice. Most people I meet don't talk about things that matter. He looked at her. Maybe you've been talking to the wrong people. Her heart did something strange, then something unfamiliar. A flutter she hadn't felt in a long, long time. She stood, suddenly needing air. Should probably figure out my hotel. Elias stood too, careful not to jostle Lily. You don't have one booked. I was supposed to be on a plane, remember? He hesitated. I know it's crazy, but my sister gave me a voucher for a hotel near the airport. 2 beds, you're welcome to crash there. Safe place, quiet, kid approved. She raised an eyebrow. You're offering to share a room with a stranger. He grinned. You're not a stranger. You're the woman who almost died protecting my daughter's snacks. She stared at him for a long moment. And then, against every icy business instinct she had, she nodded. Okay, but I get first pick on the pillows. The hotel room was plain, tucked just off the airport shuttle route, its walls a forgettable beige and the carpet the color of old oatmeal. But it was clean, quiet, and most importantly had 2 queen-sized beds with mountain-like pillows. Peyton barely noticed the dull decor. Her mind was still tangled around the man who was currently kneeling beside the bed, tucking a pink fleece blanket around his daughter. Lily had fallen asleep again on the shuttle, her small head resting against her dad's chest without a care in the world. Peyton had watched them, her phone silent in her lap for the first time in hours. She hadn't even opened her email since sitting down for pretzels. She hadn't realized how loud her life had become until it all went quiet. I think she's down for the night, Elias said softly, standing and grabbing a bottle of water from his backpack. She'll sleep through a fire truck. Lucky her, Peyton replied, kicking off her heels and sinking onto the edge of the second bed. Her feet ached in places she didn't know could ache. Haven't slept through the night in 3 months. He handed her a bottle without asking. You look like someone who could use about 12 hours. She took it, eyeing him skeptically. And you don't. I've learned to function on 4. Is that parenting thing or a woodworker thing? Both, and also a don't have much of a choice thing. She nodded slowly, unscrewing the cap. It's weird. I don't usually do this. What, sleep? Share a room with a stranger, accept help, breathe. Elias walked over to the window and cracked it an inch. You don't seem like someone who asks for anything. I don't, she admitted, watching him. I built everything I have by being the one who fixes things, the one who has the answer, taking a break. She trailed off. It feels like failure. He leaned against the sill, arms crossed. I think knowing when to let someone else hold the weight for a second is the opposite of failing. That feels like a very poetic way of saying, look like, I'm about to collapse. You look like someone who's been carrying too much, Too fast for too long. Peyton stared at him. His eyes didn't flinch. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't flirting. He was just seeing her. And that was somehow more disarming than anything else. "I don't usually let people see past the surface," she said quietly. He tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because people use it. They find your cracks and they pry them open." He nodded, like he understood without asking for more. "I've met those people." She stood and crossed to the window beside him. The parking lot below was still, lit by a few scattered lamps. "You're not what I expected when I met you." "What did you expect?" "I don't know, someone gruffer, maybe a little more overwhelmed." "I've had practice," he said with a faint grin. "And besides, this isn't the worst day I've had." She glanced at him. "What was?" He hesitated, then gave a slow answer. "The day Lily's mom left. She packed a bag while I was at work, left a note on the fridge, said she wasn't cut out for it, said she didn't want to be trapped." Peyton didn't speak. There was nothing to say that didn't sound like pity, and she had a feeling Elias wouldn't want that. "She was 24, he continued. "We were kids. I think she thought love was supposed to be lighter than it was, easier." Peyton looked down at the little girl sleeping soundly in the other bed. "But you stayed." "She didn't love being a mother. I do." She turned to face him. "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" "Sometimes, but then I look at Lily and know, I wouldn't change it." They stood in silence for a moment. The window opened just enough to let in the distant hum of the highway. "What about you?" he asked. "What's the thing you don't say out loud?" She exhaled, long and slow. "That I don't know who I am without my work. That if I lost it all tomorrow, I'm not sure I'd even know how to be a person." He didn't look away. "That's not weakness. That's just a sign you've poured everything into something that mattered." "It was supposed to be temporary," she said. "A stepping stone, and then it became the whole staircase." Elias nodded, thoughtful. "I think sometimes we build so fast, we forget to look up and see where we are." She let out a soft laugh. "You're too wise for someone who wears paint-stained sneakers." "I've been told that, usually by people who don't listen to me anyway." She smiled, and for a second the room didn't feel so beige. The tiredness in her bones didn't feel so heavy. He pushed off the window frame. "I should let you get some sleep. You've got a summit to reschedule." "I might not," she said, surprising herself. "I think I might just not go." He paused. "You'd skip it." "I missed the flight for a reason, didn't I?" He studied her. Maybe the delay was the point. She didn't stop him when he moved toward the bathroom to brush his teeth. She just watched the way he moved easy, unhurried, like a man who knew what it meant to make every second count. When he came back out, he flipped off the main light and climbed into the bed beside Lily without another word. Peyton lay in her own bed, staring at the ceiling, the hush of the room wrapping around her like a bomb. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about deadlines or investors or media reports. She was thinking about how Elias had offered her a bottle of water without asking, how he'd made space without making her feel like a burden, how his daughter trusted him completely. She turned on her side, watching the slow rise and fall of Lily's small form. Maybe, just maybe, this was the pause she hadn't known she needed. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want it to end. Peyton woke to the scent of cinnamon and the low murmur of a cartoon-themed song coming from the television. For a disorienting moment, she didn't remember where she was. The hotel room was washed with soft morning light, the beige curtains glowing gold, and across the room, Elias sat on the floor with Lily, helping her build a towering castle out of travel-sized toiletry bottles and a roll of socks. Lily looked up and whispered something, and Elias turned, catching Peyton's gaze. "Good morning," he said, voice low. "We tried not to wake you." "You didn't," she replied, stretching slowly. I think that's the longest I've slept in years. He stood, brushing off his jeans. We snuck out while you were still dead to the world. There's a bakery across the street. Lily picked the pastries. Lily beamed. I got the one with extra icing. Peyton swung her legs over the side of the bed. That sounds dangerously tempting. There's coffee too, Elias added. Figured that might be the true peace offering. She hadn't realized how much she needed it until the first sip hit her lips. That might be the best thing I've ever tasted. Lily clapped her hands. Daddy says coffee is grown-up rocket fuel. That's exactly right, Peyton said with a small laugh. Your dad is very wise. Elias glanced at the clock. We've got a couple hours before our flight boards. Thought we'd take a walk. There's a park a few blocks down. Lily needs to burn off some energy. Peyton hesitated. Would it be weird if I came with you? He met her gaze, steady. Not at all, unless you're afraid of monkey bars and pigeons. Peyton stood, already reaching for her blazer before pausing. For once, it didn't feel right. She opened her carry-on and pulled out a soft cashmere sweater, instead the only casual thing she'd packed. She caught Elias watching her and raised a brow. What? Nothing. Just didn't picture you in anything that didn't belong on a runway. Consider this my undercover look. 15 minutes later, they were walking down a damp sidewalk, Lily skipping ahead, her sparkly sneakers flashing in the sunlight. The park was small but charming swaying trees, a duck pond, and a few scattered benches occupied by early risers and dog walkers. Lily darted toward a play structure, and Elias followed, giving Peyton a nod toward a bench nearby. She watched him help Lily climb onto a jungle gym, his hands steady, his smile easy. Something about the way he moved made her chest ache not with sadness, but with a kind of longing she hadn't let herself feel in years. He joined her a few minutes later, brushing a leaf from his shoulder. She can entertain herself for hours. I just have to pretend to chase her every so often. You're good with her, Peyton said, keeping her eyes on the swings. She makes it easy. Peyton leaned back against the bench. If someone had told me yesterday that I'd be sitting in a park with a 6-year-old and a carpenter from Tennessee, I would have laughed them out of the room. And if someone had told me I'd be sharing pastries with a branding mogul who flies across the world for meetings, I'd have asked what kind of movie they were pitching. She turned to him. You know who I am. I Googled you last night, he admitted, not sheepishly but with quiet honesty. After you fell asleep. She didn't flinch, and your company's impressive. Everything you've built, hell, your client list reads like a red carpet. But, he shrugged, doesn't change how I see you. She studied him. Most people either want something when they find out, or they start treating me like I'm breakable. I don't want anything, he said plainly, and you're the least breakable person I've ever met. Her throat tightened. That might be the kindest thing anyone said to me in a long time. I meant it. They sat in silence for a moment, the breeze dancing through the trees overhead. Do you ever think about starting over? She asked suddenly. He looked at her thoughtful. In what way? Not giving up, just changing direction, doing something completely different, walking away from the life you've built, even if it's working. Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I think about it every time I see Lily light up over something small, a butterfly, a new book, the way she finds magic in things I'd walk right past. Peyton followed his gaze to Lily, who was now trying to balance a pinecone on her head. She's lucky. I'm lucky, he said, voice low. Peyton hesitated. I think I've spent so long climbing that I forgot to ask if I even like the view. What would you do if you weren't doing what you do now? She blinked. I don't know, that's the problem. There is no backup plan. This was always it. He nudged her gently with his shoulder. Maybe that's the first question worth answering. They walked back slowly, Lily in the middle, holding both their hands and swinging her feet with every step. Peyton found herself laughing more easily, her defenses lowered in ways that felt foreign but not frightening. Back in the room, Peyton checked her phone for the first time all morning. 37 missed calls. Her assistant, her director of operations. A European client in mild panic. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering. "You don't have to answer them right now," Elias said quietly behind her. "I know." She turned the phone off and set it face down on the table. "You were serious about missing Zurich?" he asked. "I was." His brow furrowed. What changed? She looked at him, then at Lily, who was humming to herself while coloring on the hotel notepad. "You did," she said simply. "This did." He didn't move, but something shifted between them, unspoken, undeniable. Their flights were scheduled an hour apart. Peyton didn't trust herself to speak much as they checked out. She helped Lily zip her coat and carried her bag to the shuttle without being asked. When they reached the terminal, she pulled Elias aside while Lily darted between vending machines. "I don't want this to be the end of the story," she said quietly. "It doesn't have to be." "You're in Tennessee, I'm in Manhattan." "Flights exist," he replied, "and so does the internet and phones, and maybe a little thing called trying." She exhaled. "I've never done that before." "Then maybe it's time." He pulled a small business card from his wallet. It was plain, simple. Just his name, number, and the words Nolan Custom Design. She took it, brushing her fingers along the edge like it was something fragile. "I don't want to lose this," she said. "You won't." And then, without asking, without hesitation, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't staged or showy. It was quiet, sure, and full of the kind of promise that didn't need to be spoken. When they pulled apart, Lily was watching them with a look of total satisfaction. "I knew you liked her," she declared. Peyton laughed, breathless. "You're very observant." "I'm 6, Lily said proudly. "I know everything." Elias grinned. "That's not even an exaggeration." As they walked toward security, Peyton felt the weight of her old life tug at her heels, but it no longer felt like an anchor. It felt like something she could set down, even if only for a while. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was late for anything. 3 weeks later, Peyton stood in the middle of her Tribeca penthouse, staring at a half-finished suitcase and a plane ticket that wasn't to Zurich, Tokyo, or any other city on her usual itinerary. It was to Nashville. The past 21 days had felt like stepping out of her own body and into someone else's quieter, kinder life. Her inbox was still full, her team still spiraling about her delayed return, but she'd made a decision. She'd pulled herself off 3 panels, turned down 2 interviews, and for the first time, stepped back without her world collapsing. She picked up her phone and called her housekeeper. "Maria, I'm heading out for a few days. Can you make sure the plants get watered and the packages are brought in?" "Of course, Miss Vance. Should I stock the fridge for your return?" Peyton smiled faintly. "No need. I'm not sure when I'll be back." She arrived in Nashville the next afternoon, the air warmer, softer than she remembered. Elias had offered to pick her up, but she'd insisted on surprising him. She hadn't told him she was coming, only that she'd been thinking about their park conversation more than he could know. The taxi dropped her off in front of a modest, slate-colored building with a small carved sign reading Nolan Custom Design. The windows were open, faint music drifting out, something acoustic, easy on the ears. She stepped inside. The shop smelled like cedar and varnish. Tools lined the walls in perfect order, and in the center of the room stood Elias, sleeves rolled up, sanding the edge of what looked like a kitchen island. He glanced up, and the look that passed over his face stopped her cold. Surprise, yes, but deeper than that, something raw and real, something that made her knees feel unreliable. "You came," he said, voice rougher than she remembered. "I thought it was time I saw your world," she replied. He set the sander down carefully, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You didn't even call." "I wanted to see your face," she said, without warning, to know if this still felt like something. He crossed the space between them, slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch her. "It does," he said. "Every day since the airport, it's felt like something." She took a breath that felt like her first in weeks. "Then, I think I'm ready." "For what?" "To stop running my life like it's a company I'm trying to sell." He let out a breath. "Peyton." She pressed her fingers to his chest. "I'm not saying I'm walking away from everything, but I want to build something that isn't just numbers and campaigns and investor calls." He placed his hand over hers. "You don't have to change for me." "I'm not. I'm changing because for the first time in 10 years, I actually want something I can't calculate." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he cupped her face and kissed her, not like someone trying to impress, but like someone who'd been waiting for the earth to tilt just right. When they pulled apart, he whispered, "Lily's going to flip." She laughed. "Is she at school?" "Yeah, but she's been asking if we're going to see you again. I think you made an impression." Peyton smiled. "Would it be crazy if I said I brought a suitcase?" "Only if you didn't pack pajamas. Lily insists on pancake breakfasts in superhero-themed sleepwear." "Then it's a good thing I stopped at the gift shop in the airport." That night, Peyton stood in the kitchen of Elias's small home while Lily decorated pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream. The house was cozy, filled with soft light and the kind of energy that made her shoulders drop 2 inches just from standing in the doorway. Elias handed her a mug of tea. "You fit here," he said quietly. She looked around. "I didn't expect to." "You're not what I expected either." She leaned against the counter. "You know, I always thought love was supposed to be grand gestures and fireworks. But this pancakes, tea, paint stains on your jeans, it feels more real than anything I've ever built." "That's because it is," he said. "It's not about the moment you fall, it's what you build after." She met his gaze. "Then let's build something." 3 months later, Peyton stood in a sunlit barn just outside Nashville, surrounded by wildflowers and close friends. She wore a simple ivory dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Lily stood between her and Elias, holding a bouquet almost bigger than she was. The ceremony was short, intimate. When Elias said his vows, he didn't talk about fate or fairy tales. He talked about choices, about waking up every day and choosing her, about building a life that wasn't perfect but was theirs. When it was Peyton's turn, she didn't talk about airports or missed flights. She talked about how she'd spent years thinking love had to be earned with success, until she met a man who reminded her that some things like kindness and laughter and showing up were more valuable than anything she could fit in a portfolio. They kissed while the cicadas sang in the trees, and Lily clapped like she'd just witnessed a magic trick. Later, at the reception, Peyton pulled Elias aside and handed him a small wrapped box. "You didn't have to get me anything," he said. "I wanted to." Inside was a photo. The 3 of them, taken at the park the day after they met. Lily was mid-giggle, Elias half turned toward her, and Peyton, caught off guard, was laughing with her whole face. "You kept this?" he asked. "It reminded me what everything should feel like." He looked up at her. "You know what this means, right?" "What?" "You're stuck with us now." She grinned. "That's exactly the plan." And just like that, Peyton Vance, the woman who never missed a flight, never let her phone go unanswered, never made space for anything that didn't fit perfectly in her 5-year plan, found herself exactly where she was meant to be. Home. The rhythm of their new life settled in slowly, like the way a song gently slips into your bones without you realizing it. Peyton had never imagined herself waking to birdsong instead of sirens, or trading morning conference calls for coffee with Elias on the porch, while Lily insisted on naming every cloud overhead. But here she was, 6 months into a life that felt nothing like the one she'd built, and everything like the one she was finally ready to live. It wasn't idyllic all the time. There were moments when Peyton's fingers itched for her old schedule, when she caught herself mentally calculating quarterly growth out of habit. But there was something grounding in the way Elias would reach across the kitchen table, lace their fingers together, and say, "You're allowed to rest too, you know." He was building her a desk, one made of reclaimed oak from a farm a few towns over. She'd never asked him to, but one morning she found him sketching plans beside her coffee mug. "For when you want to dream up something new," he'd said, his voice quiet but sure. She hadn't told him yet, but she'd been thinking of starting something again, not the empire-chasing kind of work that had consumed her before, but something smaller. Boutique branding for purpose-driven businesses. Something that helped people like Elias builders, makers, dreamers tell their stories in a way that matched their craft. She was still working out the name. One evening, after Lily had gone to sleep in her unicorn pajamas and the dishes were stacked neatly in the drying rack, Peyton sat beside Elias on the porch swing. Fireflies blinked lazily across the yard, and the scent of honeysuckle curled through the air. "I've been thinking," she said, resting her head against his shoulder. "Dangerous," Elias teased, brushing her knuckles with his thumb. "What about?" She hesitated. "About buying the old bookstore on Main. It's been sitting empty for almost 2 years. I drove past it yesterday and couldn't stop staring at the windows." He turned his head, curious. "Bookstore?" "I'd turn the front half into a studio. A creative space for local business owners to work on their branding, maybe host workshops. The back could be for community events, pop-ups, art nights, even Lily's school projects." Elias leaned back, taking it in. "That's a hell of an idea." "I want to do it differently this time. No investors, no shareholders, just me, us." He looked at her then, slow and certain. "I'll help you renovate it." "I was counting on that," she said with a grin. "You already owe me for accidentally painting over my favorite sweater. You left it on the workbench. You dripped turquoise on cashmere." He kissed her then, warm and lingering, his hand sliding into her hair. "I'll buy you 10 new ones." "I don't want 10 new ones," she whispered. "I want this, you, us." She didn't need to say more. They both knew what it meant. The next morning, Peyton visited the bookstore with Lily in tow. The windows were dusty, the floorboards tired, but the bones were still good. Lily declared it the best place ever, and promptly began mapping out where her reading fort should go. By the end of the week, the property was theirs. They spent the next 2 months transforming it. Elias built custom shelving from salvaged walnut. Peyton hand-lettered the signage herself, something she hadn't done since college. Lily painted a mural in the kids' corner featuring a dragon who looked suspiciously like her dad in a cape. The grand opening was modest, but the turnout was anything but. Locals came to see the space, to peek at the shelves, to ask about the workshops that would start in the spring. Peyton wore a simple navy dress, her hair pinned loosely, and greeted every guest by name. Elias stood beside her, his hand on her waist, Lily perched on his shoulders, offering cookies to anyone under 5 feet tall. Later that night, as they locked up for the first time, Peyton turned to Elias. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I missed that flight." "I'm not," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I think you landed exactly where you were meant to." A year passed. The studio flourished, bringing in designers, writers, and entrepreneurs from neighboring towns. Peyton found herself mentoring young women who reminded her of a version of herself she'd long outgrown, the one who thought love was a distraction, not a foundation. She taught them how to build without burning out, how to dream without losing themselves. Elias's carpentry business expanded, too. His handcrafted pieces began appearing in high-end retreats and boutique hotels, thanks in part to the beautiful branding Peyton had quietly designed for him one late night while he dozed on the couch. Lily, now 7, became a fixture in both workshops and the woodshop. She declared herself co-CEO of everything, and nobody argued. One crisp October afternoon, Peyton stepped into the backyard where Elias was sanding a new bench for the town library. She was barefoot, holding a small velvet box in her hand. He looked up, smiling at the sight of her. "You're not usually the one with surprises," he said. "I figured I was overdue." He wiped his hands and walked to her. She opened the box without a word. Inside was a slim band, hammered gold, with a tiny engraving on the inside, "Always home." Elias blinked, caught off guard. "Peyton." "I want to marry you again," she said, "but this time not in a barn with 12 cousins and a goat in the background. I want to do it here, just us. Lily can officiate." Elias laughed, voice rough with emotion. "She's going to demand a crown." "She already has one picked out." He pulled her close, resting his forehead to hers. "You're full of surprises." "I've got more," she whispered, "but I thought this was a good place to start." They kissed beneath the turning leaves, the smell of fresh sawdust and autumn filling the air around them. And that weekend, in the backyard surrounded by wildflowers and their favorite people, they renewed their vows beneath a homemade arch, Lily standing proudly between them in a flower crown and superhero cape. Peyton didn't wear heels. She didn't carry a phone. She didn't need to. Because she had everything she'd been chasing all along: safety, purpose, and a love that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with choosing each other, every single day. And this time, she wasn't late for anything. She'd arrived exactly where she was always supposed to be.